It's the first of a new month, and y'all know what that means. Not tier shifts yet, but we get usage stats. We got a whole bunch of projected shifts coming at you. Good amount of them NU related. Unfortunately, it means we're obliterating PU, but a lot of NU potential shifts, and even a real shift. A real thing happening. So we're going to talk about all of this today. And of course, a little reminder before we get too far into this video. I'm trying to hit 10k subs by the end of the year, guys. And if you like daily uploads where we just have fun talking the talk about Pokemon, then just subscribe. Come on. Help a brother out. I'm very close to 9,000 subs. Can we get 9,000 before the end of this month? Please? You know how they said wake me up before September ends, or when September ends? I don't remember the song, I'm so sorry. Same idea, get me to 9k before September. Anyhow, I'm gonna start up here with an actual tier shift. Brute Bonnet actually ended up dropping out of NU down to PU, and there's a very simple reason in my opinion for this, too, I guess. Sun teams are not a thing right now, and that was where Bonnet was getting much of its use prior to, you know, Drought's ban. It was getting a lot of use on Sun, it was really good on Sun. Then when Drought got banned, it kind of just stopped getting usage, and as new dark types came to the picture, and just in general got better, especially, you know, think like Incineroar, Alolan Muck especially, with those two. Alolan Muck coming back into the meta, Incineroar just establishing itself, like, truthfully near the top of the meta. Umbreon even kind of showing its face more and more, you know, even though the builds Umbreon goes on maybe aren't the best, it's still really good at vibe checking some offenses, and offense is really good right now, so that helps out its case. Bonnet has struggled more and more to have a use in this tier, and it's just exacerbated a lot more by its pretty egregiously bad matchup into Cresselia. It's like the only dark type that doesn't kinda beat Crest. Like Umbreon at the very least will always force Crest to Terra. And although Bonnet can do the same, I just have never felt like Bonnet's threat level versus Crest has been enough to really mandate like worry from your opponent. Whereas with Umbreon, you're literally poisoning it and taking it out of the fold for the rest of the game. With Bonnet, it's just not as good, especially too because it takes so much more from Moonblast than the others do without having a way to recover back HP other than like Synthesis. Which is fine, it's just, personally, I always feel like Bonnet seeds a lot of momentum in these games, where something like Umbreon, yeah, it's a passive blob, but you've got moves like Toxic and Foul Play that help make up for that. Whether it's completely, I'm not gonna say completely shutting down HO, but really giving HO a lot of issues with Protox Wish just letting you stall stuff out, whether it's having Foul Play to literally sit in front of some physical attackers, and as they try and greedily boost up in front of you, you just whack them with that Foul Play and say, bye-bye, out of sight, out of mind, my guy. So, and some of these things really help. You know, like Umbreon, even though it's maybe not the best meta fit, still be pretty reasonable to the tier, whereas with Bonnet, you gotta run like Covert Cloak, you want Terra Dart because you want that Sucker Punch, you know, kind of gives you a similar outlook versus maybe HO as Umbreon does, where you at least have that super strong priority to check the frail setup supers. But you end up wanting a defensive Terra type like Steel or Poison so that you can help out versus Crest, Water Tauros, etc. And it's just not really that feasible. Now, that's not to say Bonnet's like bad right now. I do still feel like those, especially the Covert Cloak sets, are not too bad. It helps you switch into Melodic a little bit better. Vapo, you're like pretty decent into these types of Pokemon. It's not the kind of guy you need it to be. So then we go down to here. This is where we got some projected shifts, and I'll like gloss over the YuYu stuff because I at least have been playing enough YuYu lately to comment on it. Zapdos Rise would obviously be huge. It's one of the best checks in the tier to all three of like Excadrill, Tornadus, Therian, and Okidogi. So losing it for that is going to shake up quite a lot. On the other hand, it's one of the more annoying presences of the tier 2. Whether it's just because you hate static, which, fair. Scizor users, rise. Or whether it's just because of you hating the offensive pressure it puts on teams. Because like, Volt Switch, Heat Wave, Hurricane, really, really annoying to play around. So either outlook is pretty fair to have with Zappy. I'm very curious to see how that rise would affect the tier. And in drops, of course, Blissey and Claude would both be huge for stall. Claude's got some other cool things too going for it, where it's like, it's not a good Okidogi check, but it's passable enough if you're like fully physically defensive. and they don't have psychic fangs, you know, there's a lot of context you need there, but it might be a limiter at least, and that's never bad. But it's also a spiker, which YuYu getting another one of those, not bad, always pretty cool. A rock resist as well is pretty cool to have too, which is going hand in hand with it being a ground type. Maybe you want to hype up water absorb sets to help check Greninja. That's cool. Tran would actually be pretty similar to Zapdos in it being a Tornadus Punisher. Mostly though if you're running like Flame Body, because Nin, they try and knock her U-turn. Knock obviously don't love because Tran doesn't have recovery like Zapdos does, but catching the U-turns and maybe getting a Flame Body burn is never bad. It's not the old burn from Gen 6 and before, where you just lost all of your HP every turn, it felt like. But it'll still be a nice way to inhibit it, and potentially support teammates like Thundurus Therian, where, hey, I mean, now when you take, like, the knock, it does a lot less. I don't even know why I brought up Thundurus Therian. You're gonna Heat Wave you down, but shh, don't worry about it. I feel like there's a mod I'm forgetting, though, that, like, Torn does want to use knock versus, like, repeatedly. Can I think of that real quick? I think I'm trolling myself, guys. I think the self troll has come in. Regardless, y'all get the point. It's just a way to inhibit it and make it a little bit less effective in its job. So there's that. And Skarm's really cool because that's just outright an Excadrill, like, really good answer. I don't know if I call it a counter because Rock Slide flinching will happen, but you are a very, very good answer regardless. You're just a generally good wall. Another Spiker, another ground immune. Probably, I mean, I'm not going to say it would take Ogerpon out of the meta, but it would definitely help. Even checking Cornerstone decently. I say decently, you're probably taking a million from +2 IV Cudgel, but hey, you're a check. You're definitely a check. Anyhow, other things going on. All of these rises make a ton of sense. Hoopa Unbound is debatably overpowered for UU's standards. I think most of the reason people aren't entirely sold on it being broken is like low kicks being super common. And so Hoopa always has to play with the threat of first impression. Plus then you've got like Cobalion and Tinkaton as fairly common good answers to Hoopa. Just we don't talk about the fact that they died Thunderbolt sets. We just have to ignore that. Anyhow, Hoopa Unbound is one of the best, you know, Scarfer / breakers of the tier. It should be rising. It's also it's a dark type, and dark types offensively are just always really good. Thundurus Therian as well. This has been something in the making for a while. Decent Zapdos botherer, good Tornadus Therian botherer. Generally just a solid breaker too, and it's not been as impacted by Gligar coming in the tier as maybe some people would have thought, because it's just teching Psychic now onto its set, and you're just fine there. And an Okidogi, just like with Hoopa, I think you can make a very strong case that Okidogi is too much for UU. There have been some adaptations, like Pheasantipity is at least a check sometimes to Okidogi. Not an amazing one by any stretch, but it can switch into like the CCs pretty reasonably. It doesn't mind knockoff. It's a decent Gren check too, so there's more use case there. And Gligar usage also helps check Dogi, but this mon's like an insane sweeper with bulk up. Good Scarfer as well. It's very much in the mold of Hoopa Unbound with the Scarf set, where it's not really being used to revenge kill as much as it's being used as a breaker, and you're just supplementing its already like really good offensive outlook in terms of the damage it does with some extra speed to, you know, give you that kind of safety you want. So we're also saying, like, even though things like say Zapdos and Torn T are super common and help keep it in check, you can just run Terra Electric and then you don't care about them. So very malleable guy. Overall, just a very nice person. I did some things that drop. Hawlucha dropping's a little odd, actually, because Psyterrain is really good right now with, like, Poltegeist. So maybe this rebounds and it stays UU. We'll have to see. And then, admittedly, these three here, it's just random hype. All of this is random hyper offense, right? But these three are, like, the lead types / the, like, enablers. Whereas Lucha's a beneficiary of something else. We don't really see HO with Alola Tails. Most of the hyper offenses being used in UU right now, to my understanding, have like a Mew lead on them. And so you're looking at the hazard stack variants more often than not. Webs, I just don't see. When I used Sticky Web in UU, that was like the first time I had seen it get used in UU. And a couple of the guys that we faced that video with webs. And in Torkoal, I genuinely never see Sun in this tier, so there you go. Then we got some potential, Lost Are You, Frostlass. I don't care. It's like, Frostlass is probably the best HO lead in NU right now for Hazard Stack, or just Hazard Setting HO, because you can still do Lycan Dog. But, I don't know, I don't really care if Last leaves. I don't have to deal with the Avalanche Destiny Bond nonsense anymore, I guess that's cool, but truthfully, I don't care. And then, Necrozma could come back down to NUBL. This is only relevant if we want to retest it, and I don't think anyone really wants to. But look at this, a potential drop to NU! Overquil! So Overquil, of course, coming back would be pretty huge. We have been wanting an Overquil return for a while now. It's just a really good mon. It would make rain teams a lot better, but having another dark type option is always good. And Overquil's pretty cool too, because it's like Incineroar. You can Sword Stance up versus Cresselia and just overwhelm it. So that's really neat. It's also not weak to Moonblast, which is the other big thing. And unlike Incineroar, Overquil actually has recovery if you want to go Pain Split Sword Stance or something on a more specially defensive set, where you still tap into your utility. Maybe you're running like Barb Barrage, Crunch, SD, Pain Split. You could do something like that. Function similar to the specially defensive Sword Stance Incin sets. And there'd be that. You also, of course, are one of the best Galarian Slowbro answers available. You just completely shut down those toxic pivot sets that run, it's like Psychic, Flamethrower, Toxic Slack-Offs, roughly what those run. You're also good check to the setup set, so overall, yeah, an Overquil drop would do a lot of good for the tier. My only concern would be, like what we were saying earlier with Rain. Shinjinir was saying in the Discord, he thinks maybe Overquil would literally break Rain, and I don't know if it would, but I think it's a genuinely worth considering concern. The nice thing, at least, is Thundurus isn't in the tier anymore. I feel like we lost something else for Rain, but I think, no, it was just Thundurus. Thundurus is definitely, like, super scary. Obviously, we have Torn still to fill a lot of the same void, but Thundurus was for sure better. Yeah, we'll see if Quill does drop. If it does, cool. If it doesn't, oh well. And then, well, I guess we'll go to this as well first, because this is a drop out of NU, so it's kind of relevant. In DD, we just don't see Psychic Terrain stuff very commonly in the tier. It's not that it's bad, I just think right now the more common terrains have been Grassy, and even Electric I saw recently from Stories in her Ladder Tour playoff set versus Shiloh. So, I'm not I mean, y'all have seen me try to use Psychic Terrain. It goes really, really well every time, right? Anyhow. It's one of those drops that I don't really think it changes the outlook of NU at all. Now, this is where we can actually talk about some stuff here. Potential rises into NU. Inteleon could be joining the ranks from PUBL. And if you're Eternally, you think this makes a ton of sense. You think Inteleon is borderline broken in the tier. Inteleon is... It's doing that thing that you really like when you build balance, or even just like a bulky offense, where it's so fast, it makes you just happier to build with it, because it means you don't feel like you're building this super slow-paced team that's just going to get run down by any sort of offense. If you're paying attention to current NU right now, you'll know balance is not in a very good spot. A lot of balanced builds end up being a little too slow, a little too passive, a little too helpless versus opposing bulky setup. It's kind of tough to get your team in an ideal state where you're, you're not hitting those two, et cetera, bits of info. Where you have a team, you got enough speed, you got enough insurance for bulky setup, you got enough overall roll comp. I think right now the issue balance, and is what Eternally said, so I'm kind of parroting him here. You end up roll comping too much, and when you do that, yeah, the team just ends up being kind of passive and doesn't do enough. And of course, if you watch Joey and I play NU, when we load up balance, it's usually not that good. It's when we have the offensive teams that we're like, okay, now this is epic. So, I think Inteleon's nice for balance at least when you try to use it, because it does... It's the type of roll comp that you'll want, where it's a fast mon that hits really hard. Throw a Specs Inteleon on a team, you will get results. Hell, throw a Scarf Inteleon on a team even, it's not too bad. So, pretty good mon. And Vaporeon usage is kind of slipping, even though I think it's still really good in the tier. It is definitely going down some right now. So, that even helps out Inteleon. Obviously, Vapo is a huge roadblock to you, and if you don't have to deal with that mon, then ooh, good. Zong Rising to Inyu. There's exactly 0 people that will be shocked by this. Bronzong is at a, all-time high for this generation, and Inyu, just an incredible mon. One of, I'm not gonna say it's a Flygon counter, because Flygon has moves like Throat Chop and Fire Punch that it can run if it really wants to have the Bronzong coverage. I'm even gonna say it should run those moves, unless it's like, if you're talking like, okay, let me back it up a bit. There are some fundamental issues with fitting those moves on Flygon. So again, it kind of comes down to the whole build team not too slow is a real issue. Well, first impression Flygon's really hard to pass up on, man. It really is hard to pass up on. And so Banded, most frequently, you're just defaulting to Earthquake, Dragon move, usually Scale Shot, U-turn, and first impression. You're just defaulting that because it gives you so much of everything. It's the best option. So if you're trying to fit in like Throat Chop or God forbid Fire Punch because you are an Earthworm hater, what are you dropping? I mean, you're never dropping EQ or U-turn. Even Scale Shot's kind of hard to drop because it's honestly a really good tool to have late game when you get rid of the your opponent will usually have something that's as close to a counter as you can get, and Scale Shot lets you clean late game pretty decently. First Impression is like the most droppable move, but even then it's pretty hard to want to pass up on because it's just so nice to have. Offense is still really strong in you, and you really want that extra insurance against those threats. The most common way I've seen to fit those types of coverage on Flygon's actually been on these other sets. Like, you can go Scarf and have Throat Chop. You can go Dragon Dance, 3 attacks, and fit Throat Chop then. Otherwise, it's pretty tough, and so as a result, Bronzong is pretty consistently a counter to Flygon. The most it does is U-turn, which is not, something you want to keep dealing with. That's where you got to make some predictions and not just keep going Zong on U-turns. But otherwise, yeah, it answers Flygon greatly. You get rocks up. You could be Iron Defense, maybe set up in front of it. You got some good options. So just overall an amazing mon. The Double Dance sets are even still, they're not like some game breaker, but they are really fun and they're pretty decent as well. So you gotta also watch out for those. Gligar up to Inyu, I'm gonna be honest, is a bit surprising. I didn't think it was getting this type of usage. I do think people respect it though for the increase in Toxicroak usage, at least partly. People also do respect it for having spikes and U-turn and knock and talk. Literally all of the reasons it was like super S rank months ago, they apply again here. And I'm in a YuYu build, I guess I could scroll down here too. And if you just want to look at like defensively what's Gligar offering, well, an EQ immunity, like Gligar is also a really good Flygon check. We can't ignore that. It's a good Mienshao check if you care about that mon. And versus the common removal, I mean, Talonflame and Tentacruel and Brambleghast are like your most common removal options. Well, Talonflame is annoying because it'll probably burn you, but you can knock its boots off, maybe Toxic, and that's pretty cool. Tentacruel, you don't want to switch Tenta into a Gligar. It may just EQ you, and fact remains, a lot of Tentacruels, their best move to hit you with is like Flip Turn. So you don't even really fear a ton there, you just stay in. If they try to spin, alright, I'm quaking you. Then you want to flip out, alright, set that spike right back up. Set them rocks right back up. That isn't like Bramble's probably the most annoying, but again, Tox, get knock it, U-turn on it. You at least you're not dead weight. And Gligar fits pretty well alongside the steel types of the tier. Primarily, you're looking at like Copper / Reggie / Zong there, I would say. It's even weird to kind of bring up Zong, because I feel like it's really Copper Reggie that appreciate the presence. It's just, I found that Zong plus Gligar is pretty cool for hazard stacking. I just think there's a little bit more obvious defensive synergy with the grounded steals there. So, overall, it's a very good mon. I don't know where I don't think I'd say it should be in you, but it's at least not bad here. Also, hey, it checks Kila Watcher, conveniently another mon that's resing in you. Now, I naturally hated using that set on the Hyper Offense team. That Life Orb 3 attacks with T-Wave did not do it for me. I didn't feel like I did enough damage, but overall, I still do really like Kilo. It's very similar to Inteleon, where, hey look, speed, mon that does damage, all in one slot, oh my goodness, it's so wonderful. And a very underrated aspect to Kila Watcher right now in this tier that I do think is worth talking about is you could run Volt Switch, you could greed for Volt Switch. A lot of the time you'll see some of these electric types still just run U-turn for pivoting like you saw with Thunderous, because you just didn't feel like getting blocked by a ground type. Well, in this metagame, what are our ground types? Flygon, yes, take Hurricane on the Switch, or even Air Slash, bro. That's gonna be really fun for you, isn't it? Swampert, you sure you want to take this? You switch in like one time and that's it. And otherwise, what are our ground types, dude? Look at them. Look at them. Where are ground types that are not one of those two? Ah, Quagsire, yes, die to Hurricane. 2 in a row, you're dead. I'll go down to Pew. I'll even do you one better. Gastrodon? Gastro who? This mon is like not used at all. Gligar. Hey, like I said, Gligar is actually able to tank 2 Hurricanes if you EV for it. But don't tell them that. That's our little secret. The fact remains, though, is we really have a limited pool of ground types that truly switch into Kila Watcher too well. And so if you really want to greed for Volt Switch, it's fine. It's a nice way to get extra chip instead of U-turning forever. Otherwise, yeah, it's just a matter of very fast mon. It's a good Talonflame Punisher if you want to catch Defogs. Cool guy. I really do rate this mon quite highly. Screamtail, this is one that I actually think may not end up happening. The big reason for Screamtail usage to be high enough for it to rise to Inu was that it was a good Gallade check. And it's not that it lost all of its niche with Gallade being banned or anything. It's still as good as a check to bulky setup with Roar or Encore. And it's still a really good Wish Passer too. Like, Screamtail is quite hard to take down at the end of the day. I do think, though, most of its niche was coming from the fact it was the closest thing to a Gallade defensive answer that we had. There's some use case for it on Hyper Offense. We've seen some Calm Mind Speed Booster energy stuff with, like, Terra Normal Boom Burst. It's been kind of cool. That's about it, though. Galar, bro, once again, kind of on an upswing. I think it wasn't really helping its case that Gallade beat it down a little more easily than you would like out of a fighting check. Now, I'll be honest too, Alolan Muck doesn't feel that common once again. Like, it's still a good mon, but I do feel like it rose up a lot when we got the DoD Crest Shift. Now it's kind of dropped back down a bit. Not to where I'd say it's out of the A ranks, it's just maybe an A- mon instead. And Glowbro, Mr. Glowbrowingtons now is looking at a lot of dark types that it just frankly doesn't give a shit about. It's very happy to face them, so you can not toxic, you can, well, yeah, no, you can toxic things like Incineroar and Umbreon very, very easily. You can just throw off Sludge Bombs versus them too. They're just much less consistent of answers. It is, I feel, been opened up a lot, and it's got very good set versatility. You've got that set, you've got like setup, you've got AV if you want to go that route. It's got good options, and of course with regen, hey, it's a durable check. Also checks like every fighting type now in the tier pretty decently. Like, once again, I will reference the team builder for our sake here. Oh, not too high. Does not check Tarak. But yeah, Breloom, checked. Infernape, not a real Pokemon. Mienshao, checked. That's all the NU fighters, apparently. That's very funny, but let's go down more. Flamigo, checked. You are checked. I'll mention Flamigo there because it's kind of relevant in the tier. I think Flamigo's like genuinely at least a C rank mon. Heracross, kind of checked. A little scary if they Terra versus you, but you could get some damage. And then the Tauroses, they do a lot of damage, but you still check them. So, not the worst. Staraptor up to NU. I'm gonna keep it a stack with you. This mon is probably not worth having in NU, but I will give it this much. Banded Raptor is genuinely pretty annoying to face. I mean, Zong takes decent chip, frankly, from Brave Bird and even U-turn pivots. So, it's not an insurmountable task to beat through a Bronzong. That's kind of cool, right? I did really like the partnering I had with Heracross. That was like Scarf Raptor, but still. But I think both sets are like pretty passable. It's not hard to support Scarf Raptor. The only issue I would say that Raptor really has, not the only issue, the biggest, is pairing it with removal. You don't really feel amazing about your options, and removal is kind of non-negotiable. Otherwise, the rocks are set, and you are toast. Howdy and Aquatoros, as I call it, Waros, also going up. This mon's amazing. Vileplume is starting to uptick again, so that's gonna kind of hamper it. But it's a very good answer to Incineroar. And of course, with a lot of other fighters being banned now, a lot of other water types being banned now, naturally competition opens up for a mon like this to step in and say, hey, Where are your checks? Because this mon has a little bit better of an outlook for something like Vapo. Because you've got your secondary stab to hit it. So that's cool. Compare it to something like Cloyster even that didn't have that. Tentacruel isn't an amazing answer because the mon really doesn't have that amazing of physical bulk unless you're really, really invested. CC still does good chip. Toxicroak you may think is a check, but really it's not a great one because CC just does so much, and if you're facing a choice-locked Tauros, EQ is smoking your pack. So that's no fun. Very versatile mon as well, with like Scarf being good, Bandit being good, Bulk Up being good, some other sets as well. Pretty reasonable. Overall, just a really nice guy. And once again, we must talk about how priority is good to have. Aquajet. And of course, Croak Rising. This has been something in the making for a while. Just a very good breaker. Vaporeon, Milotic, your lives will be made hell. That's really all I got to say there. But I hope y'all enjoyed. I think tomorrow we're going to have a little personal VR coming out because it's been a while since we did one. And as the tier gets closer and closer to another big tier shift where, I mean, hey, there's at least a decent amount of stuff that'd be changing in NU. Even if a lot of it's just a matter of new guys. I think it's still worth talking about where we actually feel these people fall in the VR. So I appreciate y'all watching. Thanks for being subscribed if you are. If you're not, you just watched 26 minutes and 20 seconds of me yapping. Go subscribe. Take care though, y'all. Peace.